It's quite easy, really. All you got to do is match up 6 pictures of famous noses with 6 pictures of famous bogies. Cornflakes, 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 cornflakes.
Britain in the 80s was a strange, tumultuous time. It was a bit like now, but with more hair. Thatcher was telling people to eat cake, the Queen was starting a war with Argentina, there were only 4 channels on TV and 90% of those had paedophiles on them. Alongside all of this, the punk subculture had started to blossom, not just within music of course, but across the whole spectrum of media. People were moving away from the tried and tested art forms that your mum and dad were into. They were forging their own new, sometimes not great, but sometimes really good stuff. One of the most successful forms of media that really took this rambunctious, ramshackle middle finger to authority to the next level was in the comedy world, or rather, alternative comedians, which isn't a name I particularly like, by the way. It kind of implies there was just this comedy or that comedy, nothing else. But anyway, I digress. To name everyone involved in this uprising of new, young, angry, shouty comedy that made your mum wince would basically mean I just forget someone really important and then everyone shouts at me in the comments. But to name a few, we had Ben Elton, Rowan Atkinson, French and Saunders, my personal favourite, Rick Mayall, and his comedy partner in crime, Eddie Hitler, sometimes referred to by his real name, Ed Edmondson. With shows like The Comic Strip, The Young Ones, Saturday Live, Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, Bottom, and probably loads more that this wiki page I'm reading right now forgot to mention, Ed Edmondson felt like a consistent presence on my TV in the late 80s and early 90s. I was far too young to be watching the likes of The Young Ones and Bottom at the age of probably around 8 or 9, maybe 10, but regardless, I would sneak out of bed quietly, plug my headphones into the portable TV, and I'd sit there covering my mouth as Richie got smashed in the face with a frying pan, or a rodent inexplicably started talking to the camera.
Oh, lucky you!
These shows were adultly childish. They were outlandish and dumb and over the top and oftentimes surprisingly well written considering there's an incredible amount of cartoon violence and fart jokes. To this day, they are still held up as comedy classics in the UK, and with good reason. During this highly acclaimed phase of Ed Edmondson's career in the year of 1986, he published a book. At the time, I would have been 3, so it unfortunately never got to line my bookshelf next to the likes of the Transformers books and the Beano annuals. Actually, even those probably would have been too old for me, but screw it, I've said it now. Just pretend I was really clever for a 3-year-old. How to Be a Complete Bastard was a big success, and according to a different Wikipedia page, it featured such chapters as How to Be a Bastard Student, How to Be a Bastard Parent, How to Be a Complete Bastard to the Deaf, not something I expected to read, I'll be honest. Now, Virgin Games must have thought they were onto a winner here, as they owned the rights to the series and likely thought, well, it doesn't matter if it's suitable material for a game or not, we're making a game of it. This is how shit like EastEnders and Alvida's Impact get made. Forcing a popular franchise into the shape of a game is never a good idea. And had I not previously played How to Be a Complete Bastard, I'd probably be of that mindset. Truth be told, I used to own it, back when it was given away for free on the front of Your Sinclair magazine, alongside Tierna Nog and a demo of everyone's favourite beat-em-up, Ninja Hamster. Now, once again, I was far too young to have ever been playing this game, but it was very rare that I ever got to buy a copy of Your Sinclair. I got to play the game for approximately 2 hours, at which point I made Ed Edmondson eat a condom, and my auntie, who was looking after me at the time, freaked out and took the tape away from me. The compromise in order to get my beloved tape back is that I was never allowed to play How to Be a Complete Bastard ever again, and they recorded over part of the tape so I couldn't even load the damn thing back up if I tried. It had been lost to me, a memory that still stings. I wanted to eat more condoms, whatever they were. Being a full-grown adult male man, I can totally understand my freaked out auntie's game-destroying rampage, but at the time, this game looked like a hell of a lot of fun. It said fart on the screen. It said we. You could explore this entire house and there were people walking around, and oh wow, dearie me, this all looked so very exciting. It's now almost 30 years since that cataclysmic event, and I'd still not gone back to play How to Be a Complete Bastard, partly because I'd pushed that memory down where I could no longer be hurt by it, and partly because, well, looking back at the reviews, it had a very mixed reception on release, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back and sully my 2-hour memories of it. Advanced Computer Entertainment gave the game a score of 792 out of 1,000, which... Come on, guys, what sort of scoring system is that, you absolute maniacs? No wonder you're not in circulation anymore. What constitutes the game getting 793 instead of 792? That is insane. Get out. Crash Magazine gave the game 73% in 1987 and then changed their minds in 1989 by a whopping 16%, bringing it down to 57%. Sinclair User gave it a 7 out of 10 in 1987 and then 59% in 1989, either because they didn't know how to convert 7 out of 10 into a percentage or because they'd fallen out of love with it. And Your Sinclair magazine gave the game 7 out of 10 in 1987 and then, you guessed it, 5 out of 10 in 1989. In just 2 years, magazines seemed to go from well above average to barely scraping by on a middling score. The game was reviewed twice because it was re-released as a budget title, and it's weird to see the actual written reviews alongside those scores. Your Sinclair, for instance, in the initial 7 out of 10 review, don't really say an awful lot about the game, to be honest. It's mostly just a write-up in which the reviewer pretends to be Edmondson. He gives a basic rundown on the goal of the game. He says the graphics are pretty good. He says it's quite funny when you get drunk. And that's about it. Couple that with the review of the budget re-release, and they say pretty much the same thing again. It's even written in a kind of similar way, but they summarise the game thus. Lots of funny ideas, but the actual gameplay is no more than humdrum, mainly because not a lot seems to be happening, and what does happen is rather slow. For fans only. Wow, thanks for the free mediocre game that you initially gave an inflated score to, guys. Doing God's work. So, let's get into the game itself then. What's the deal? Well, before I go into that, I should explain what the hell it is that you're looking at, because if you're unfamiliar with this game, you're going to be massively confused. The screen is split into two, and while at first it might appear that this is either a split screen game or it's showing 2 different levels of the house, it's actually the same room but from a different perspective. This, to be honest, is fairly clever stuff, and I can't really remember seeing it in anything before or since this game. It's a definite necessity though, because the core concept of this game is to wander around searching the house for items that you can use to piss people off, and the player needs to be able to tell exactly how far away they are from things in a perspective that's 2D and not 3D. It's not an easy thing to pull off, and yet they have, here, with this weird ass viewing method. It works. It's fine. It's weird. I like it. Getting back to the gameplay itself though, the whole purpose of this house exploration and condom eating is to basically do as the title states, be a complete bastard. You have to find items, figure out ways to use them, and ultimately annoy the yuppies within the party so much that they all leave. It is, in certain ways, an open world point and click adventure game. There's no specific puzzles that you need to complete in order to progress, rather the puzzle pieces are provided at random, and it's up to you to work out if a puzzle piece does something useful and where it can possibly be used. Not that the game really gives you any indication as to what you can do with half of this stuff, you just have to keep interacting with things in the vain hope that something you're currently holding can actually be used to do something dastardly. In a basic example, you'll often come across a pen. Now, in typical point-and-click fashion, let's have a think about how you would go about using a pen at a party in order to be a complete bastard. Idea number 1. How about writing a big swear word on something? Vandalism is always a bastardly thing to do. Idea number 2. What about drawing a moustache on someone who's passed out? Idea number 3. What about giving yourself a fake tattoo, like a really offensive one that just says, I fuck otters or something. Anything. I'm running out of ideas. Idea number 4. Pretend it's a cock. Okay, right, I'm out of ideas. Unfortunately, none of these are the correct answer, even though they're really, really good ideas. The correct answer is... randomly stab someone with the pen? How in the love of all that is knifey would I ever know to do that? This is the biggest problem with How to Be a Complete Bastard. It sets up this admittedly dumb, but also admittedly quite exciting prospect of just going around being an arsehole to people in a virtual space. And then it doesn't really have a great set of ideas outside of that. You find a spider in a bath, for instance, and your first thought would be to go and interact with someone to try and scare them with it, but each time you interact with someone, there's no option to do anything. Only when you accidentally interact with nothing do you realise that there's an option to just drop the spider on the floor and scare everyone in the room. It soon gets to the point where the basic gameplay mechanics get in the way of the fun. You can only carry 2 items at a time, so your first job will be to walk up to objects slowly and interact with them. Search them, keep going until you find at least 2 items that you think might be useful, and then walk up to random things, again, slowly, and interact with them to see if the things you're holding can be used on the thing you're interacting with. It's laborious. There's no potentiality to do multiple things with a single item. Everything has just 1 or 2 uses, when really it needed 5 or 6 uses, considering just how many objects there are in this house and how many things there are to interact with. This essentially means that the game just grinds to a halt as you wander the hallways, trying in vain to make Edmondson do something that will annoy people. It takes this untapped concept of being a wild and annoying party guest, and it squanders it down to a boring walking simulator with short, quick stabs of something lightly amusing happening. Because ultimately the game should be funny, right? It's a game based on a comedy book. You're tasked with being a bastard. You're essentially running around pulling pranks on people. You literally have a button that lets you fart. So the game, presumably, is designed to be funny. But there's only a few times I truly laughed, and that was when the game became absolutely absurdist, much like an Edmondson TV comedy of old. The first time it happened, I found an umbrella in an umbrella stand, which... now that I say that out loud, that's exactly where you would expect to find one, but that's not the funny bit, shut up. When you pick up the umbrella, you're given the option to open it, and of course you do, because who the fuck opens an umbrella indoors? An absolute maniac, that's who. The game allows you to do this, and then it tells you that opening an umbrella indoors is bad luck. And then it turns you into a fucking oven. For the rest of that playthrough, you are literally walking around the house as an oven. An oven! This one joke caught me completely off guard. It is surrealist, outlandish, nonsensical, and absolutely what someone who spent their younger years watching The Young Ones would expect to see from an adaptation such as this. But I also did not see it coming. I didn't see it coming because, for the most part, nothing that happens in How to Be a Complete Bastard is visual. 90% of the time, when you manage to solve one of the impossible bastard tasks and you interact with something with the correct object and cause mayhem, you're not presented with anything amusing to look at. There's no animation or surprise. You're presented the outcome, for the most part, in text. Even something as simple as choosing throw the item or smash the item, your protagonist just stands there while a bit of text pops up, and your bastard points increase. Edmondson was a physical comedian. His comedy played off these big, ridiculous fight scenes and violence and smashing and crashing and falling on his arse. The game only falls on its arse in a purely metaphorical sense, because each time it feels like it's plucked something out of the air that's interesting, it often manages to execute it in a way that's neither here nor there. Thinking back to those review scores, the game got an initial 7 out of 10 and dropped down to 5 out of 10, and I can sort of understand that. When you first start to play How to Be a Complete Bastard, even now, it feels fresh, it feels full of ideas, it feels controversial and naughty, and it looks like it should be riotous good fun. The ideas, the concept, and a lot of the execution in How to Be a Complete Bastard are 7 out of 10, but the final product lands squarely in the middle, Once the dust has settled around the concept and you actually get into the meat of the game, you'll quickly find that there's not enough padding in the areas that truly mattered. There's the odd laugh to be had and the odd surprising element, but for the most part, this game about being a complete bastard is actually a game about a comedian in his prime wandering through a house, wondering what to do with himself, and occasionally being a nuisance. Or an oven. It's a game that I can recommend only as an oddity. It's a game that feels like a small step toward bigger, better dickhead simulators. It's a game that, in its own way, pushed a few boundaries. It's a game that feels innovative and fresh while also not really doing anything that's actually fun to do or watch or figure out. So I recommend the game purely as that, a curio, something that deserves to be played and experienced, but with the understanding that while it may at first seem to offer that alternative comedy of the 80s, served up in a video game, it often comes closer to a country stroll with swearing and toilet humour, which, to be fair, actually sounds pretty funny.
Summer is long gone and autumn is upon.
The British comes alive in at this time of.
It's the perfect time to get out and about and enjoy the of our autumnal landscapes.